Hi everyone, and welcome to F-Bomb Friday. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my husband, Todd. Hey, hon.
Hey, baby.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
Let's hit it. Monroe County, Michigan. It's a place that, on the surface, looks like any small Midwestern town. Quiet neighborhoods, fishing boats out on Lake Erie, the smell of marshland in the air. But if you drive just a little farther east into the cattails, the mud, and the fog, you'll find a place the locals only whisper about. It's called Dog Lady Island. Now, some legends are neat and tidy. They've got clear beginnings, middles, and ends. This is part ghost story, part monster tale, part urban legend. It's all snarl, shadow, and teeth. And depending on who you ask, she's either a mad nun, a lonely widow, a hermit, or something not quite human at all. So settle in, because this isn't just about a haunted island. This is about what happens when you cross the border between human and beast, and how some things on the edges of Michigan's swamps are better left undisturbed. On today's episode of F-Bomb, we'll be discussing the Dog Lady of Kausler Island. Imagine the slow shimmer of Lake Erie lapping against a ragged shore. This is a story that the people of Monroe, Michigan whisper with half smile and a hitch in their voice, equal parts warning and dare. It's a legend stitched from real maps and names, but threaded with blood, fur, and the kind of lonely madness that will follow you home if you spend too long thinking about islands and dogs. Dog Lady Island is located in Lake Erie near Monroe, Michigan, and it's part of the River Raisin watershed. It's a small patch of land that maps sometimes call Kausler Island, and older maps might have it labeled Fox or Plotz Island. To teenagers who've rode there in the dark, and to the elderly who remember the farms on the water, it's simply and ominously Dog Lady Island. It's the kind of island that looks smaller from a distance and somehow larger when you're standing beside it. Its trees crowded close like a chorus of backs turned. An island in morose waterways by this name and connected to old families and failed estates. The island's recorded history is patchwork, religious school or retreat in the 1800s on one hand, ambitious families trying to make an estate on the other, and in the 20th century, ownership shifting like driftwood until a solitary household and a pack of dogs remained. That much appears in the local lore and in pieces collected by Monroe area historians and folklore enthusiasts. It is on that island the figure known as the Dog Lady takes shape, and where most of the story's ache and terror live. There are variations in the Dog Lady's storytelling, That is the point with legends. They are a prism, not a photograph. But the version most commonly told begins the same way. Once there was a woman, middle-aged or older, depending on the teller, buried into the kind of small local wealth that bought islands and launched failed estates. Her name is often forgotten on purpose. Giving her a name makes her too human, people say, and legends like a little distance. After her husband either died or left, now accounts differ on that, she was left alone on the island. Your company became the pack. Doberman pinschers in many tellings, mongrel dogs and others. A dozen animals of a single mind and purpose. They were her protection, her family, a line of sharp teeth and darker loyalty. In every version, something breaks. The dogs, for reasons that range from caretaker, neglect to sudden ritual of wildness, turn on her. Some say it was a struggle for food. Others claim the dogs followed a hierarchy that would not tolerate human dominance. The most horrific recurring detail is that the dog savaged her face, ripping out her tongue, blinding her in part, leaving her a near animal with human memories. Those details appear repeated in oral retellings and then compiled local folklore accounts. From the moment of that mutilation, she is no longer simply a lonely widow. She becomes something that belongs to the island and to the dogs. She is seen sometimes running on all fours, barking, tugging at carcasses, crawling like an animal. Sometimes she is described as half woman, half dog. Sometimes described as a wild woman driven mad by hunger. Sometimes as a mournful ghost of the woman who once lived there. All versions agree that the air around the island smells like wet fur and old blood. There's a standard way the story is delivered by campfires. One friend will clear their throat, and another will point to the trees across the lake and say, "They say she still walks the shore." Then they tell about a summer night in the 1960s or 70s or 80s. The dates bend. When three boys, we'll call them Mike, Don, and Pete, took a rowboat out for a dare. They pulled up to the island under a slice of moon and stepped onto the dark sand, flashlights wobbling. They had an old transistor radio, a six-pack stashed in a cooler, and brave mouths. They walked through the scorched grass and expected the usual teenage spoils, the thrill, a cigarette, and a chance to say they've been there. Instead, they heard a noise, like a person coughing, and the sound of paws behind the brush. At first, they saw only the dogs, the slant of bone and fur in the beam of the torch, eyes reflective like two coins. And then the thing, because after all, a person whose skin has been torn, whose face hung in a new rough geometry, and who moved with a gait learned from the animals, is no longer a person in the comfortable way they understand, is no longer a person in the comfortable way they understand the word human, stepped through the trees. It had a head like a woman's, ragged hair clinging like seaweed, mouth slack where a tongue should have been, and a body that collapsed into canine motion when it ran. It launched itself not at them, but at the car across the clearing, at a parked lover's sedan, clawing at the windshield until the glass spiderwebbed. The boy screamed. The dogs barked in a chorus that harmonized with the thing's animal cries, and they tumbled back into the boat and rode like men trying to outrun their names. They say you can still hear those old boys' voices quiver when they tell the story, and that you can see the scratch marks on the hood of the car if you squint at the right time of year. This is the kind of oral testimony that keeps the tale vivid. Small, precise horrors anchored to a place people can find. Because the dog lady is a figure constructed of rumor, sightings take every available flavor. Here are the archetypal ones, drawn from the way residents recount the tale to journalists, bloggers, and each other. A driver on a lonely stretch near the creek reports something leaping onto the hood of his car at night, leaving clawed semicircles in the paint and the scent of wet fur. He stops, heart in throat, and sees a dark woman crawling along the roof, hands like paws, tapping on the windshield before vanishing into the trees. The mark on the car later becomes a local calling card. She's real. I saw the scratches. Versions of this account appear in multiple local retellings. Another version, teenagers who raft to the island report an omnipresent odor, stale whiskey mixed with wet animal musk, and on the banks find bones arranged in small heaps, perhaps a stray cat or a raccoon, maybe something older, a sign, a scavenging, or a keepsake altar. The whiskey smell connects back to the common folktale trope of the downed drinker and the hideous lover. It's also a sensory anchor that makes the tale more believable to listeners. This detail threads through oral accounts compiled in Monroe-focused folklore sites. In some versions, a local lighthouse keeper or a fisherman hears a persistent, patient knocking on his window at dawn. He opens to find muddy paw prints and the whisper of a voice that cannot be heard. He later finds his dog collar missing from his peg. This is the kind of small, intimate theft that makes the legend personal, the thing that steals what anchors us to ordinary life. Variations of this appear on regional paranormal writeups. Other storytellers say a transient came too close and woke to pain and a dog's breath. The next morning, he fled with his hair turned white and a jagged scar across his hand. Later, he muttered about her patchwork mouth and never spoke of the island again. These passing, broken people fuel the legend's edge of real-world consequence, that the island takes something from anyone who disrespects it. Several local legends and web accounts reference transient victims or frightened fishermen who return to the town shaken. Now remember, these are legend sightings. They display the pattern of folklore, dramatic sensory details like the smell and the scratches, personal stakes like the damaged car and the lost collar, and a moral underside. Don't go alone, and respect the dead. multiple local write-ups repeat many of the same elements, which is precisely how an urban legend grows. Legends don't exist in a vacuum. They live in the relationship between place and people. In Monroe, the Dog Lady is part of a broader conversation about place memory, about how certain spots accumulate oddness. In recent years, the legend even made the leap to film. A local filmmaker took the story and made a short feature inspired by the myth, bolstering its reach and giving new details to younger listeners who'd never thought to ask older neighbors. The Monroe Evening News covered that film adaptation, noting both the local interviews and the way the legend had been told to filmmakers. The filmmaker attention is important because it creates new textural traces the future tellers will mine. When a local news piece describes the Dog Lady in a certain way, redoubling the image of the Dobermans or emphasizing the tongue being ripped out, those details anchor the version that circulates next. Myth becomes true in the sense that an entire community accepts a consistent story. Several recent online pieces and local history blogs trace this exact process. The island becomes a character, and the Dog Lady's features coalesce. The sad heart of the story focuses on loneliness and transformation. If you strip away the claws and the moonlit howl, what remains is a smaller, cruel idea. Isolation breaks us. Imagine the woman in the first telling, grieving a lost partner and trying to keep life together on a private island. Humans, when cut off from the village, form odd alliances. Now, these alliances can be wholesome, the way the woman and the dogs may have first been companions, or monstrous, and survival and hierarchy twist behavior beyond recognition. The Dog Lady legend is, at its emotional core, a tale about the boundaries between human and beast and the terrible cost of losing the rituals. Neighbors, markets, church, things that hold us to our humanity. Folklorists who studied this sort of narrative point to recurrent motifs. The outsider woman who becomes a witch or monster. The pack is a mirror for human social structure as a place of exile where rules loosen and the uncanny can take hold. Folklore collectors who recorded the Dog Lady story in Monroe point to some of these motifs when they explain why the tale persists. To give the legend its proper life, let me tell you a fresh night on the island, a composite of interviews, rumors, and the small truths that hide inside terrifying imaginings. This part is storytelling, not a news report. It borrows the texture of eyewitness accounts that circulate locally. The night is a flat, windless black. You come with a friend because no one with sense goes alone. You tie the small rented boat to a willow root and step into damp leaf mold. The island smells like old bones and the last of summer's rot. The trees have a way of crowding you. The path is older than you are and smells of fox and diesel. Somewhere, a dog barks once, but not the bark of a pet, but a bark that starts and ends in the same breath. You laugh a little too loud and tell a dare story to quiet your hands from shaking. You find the old foundation, the island, once had a house, a place where laughter now fits only as an echo. You find a rusted collar beneath a tangle of briars. You pick it up because you want proof. The collar is heavy with something that is not simply grime. It smells like whiskey and worse. You hear a scraping behind you, soft at first, like a person trying to put their knees into an old coat. It is the sound of someone learning how to make human motion again and remembering animal rhythm. When you turn, she is there. Not full of specter, just a disfigured woman, one eye gone, parallel scars where the tongue should curl, shoulders bowed and blackened with grit. She watches you with a divided look, part feral hunger, part recognition. The dogs stand around her in a ring, not very many, and there's a sense of rules being observed. Don't touch the pack's food. Don't show weakness. She does not bark. She cannot. She tilts her head as if listening to something you cannot hear. Then the dogs step forward and surround your boat, not attacking you, but making it clear this land is theirs. Their mistress is theirs, and you are a trespasser. You row back to the mainland in a silence carved from the same stone the island is made of. When you check your palms, there is mud scraped into the skin and on the boat. 3 claw marks that match the story you heard as a child. You don't tell anyone the whole story, though. You carry the memory like a small, bitter seed. This is the way the Dog Lady legend enters new minds, through one small, private encounter that feels unbearably real. Legends survive for reasons that are not entirely rational. The Dog Lady legend offers a safe thrill that we gift ourselves. It provides a place-bound scare that puts teenagers through a rite of passage, offers filmmakers a local myth with cinematographic potential, and gives older residents the ability to thrash out the town's anxieties, abandonment, poverty, the erosion of community in a single horrifying figure. Local press and blogs have treated the Dog Lady with respect and skepticism in almost equal measure. Journalists will interview a folklorist who dates the story in the 1970s and will also show a salvage photograph of an island house and an old dog collar dug from the dirt. The interplay between documentation and folklore, it's part of why the tale feels real to those who live nearby. A dozen little rumors feed the big one. An old house on the island burned once, and people never really rebuilt. Students at a nearby college once made a short film about the Dog Lady, later a different feature length that older residents interpret as a kind of warning chorus. If you look at the property records, islands change hands. When people leave, stories rush in to fill the silence. Each small rumor is like a kindling. Put enough together, and the fire becomes a story that eats whole town's attention for a while. Legends often function as 2 things at once: a warning, don't go near that place, and a memorial, remember the person who suffered. The Dog Lady legend does both. It calls out reckless curiosity and at the same time preserves an image of someone who, in a decade that might have been in the 1950s or 60s, who ended up exiled and mutilated, and whose suffering transformed her into a myth. That transformation is cruel and maybe obscene. To reduce a person's life to screams and fur denies the small humanity of the woman who once probably wore aprons and kept a garden. So when you tell this story, the long one, the one you'll keep repeating for the rest of your life, if it gets a hold of you, make sure you remember that underneath the howl is a human heart. That is the real chill. Empathy and horror are neighbors in this legend. People pass down the Dog Lady legend the way they pass down advice. Don't go alone. Don't take what isn't yours. And if you smell the scent of whiskey and wet fur, turn back now. I have to say, I've never heard of the Dog Lady Island.
Yeah, I've never heard of it either. The takeaway from this, now clearly this is urban legend, but all legends are based on some truths. And my takeaway from it is it's a very sad story, and it's one that's repeated in a lot of legends that we hear. And sadly, it often involves a woman shunned, a woman hurt, a woman tortured, a woman exiled that becomes this ghost, this creature, this specter of perpetual sadness that cannot let go. It's a sad story in my mind.
Agreed. And I can see it. Once a human is left by themselves and they have no socialization, you start to blend and become what your environment is.
Right. And imagine, if she were that widow, she'd lost the love of her life. She's isolated on this island with nothing else except for a pack of dogs to call her family. There's only so much food on an island, so the pack becomes hungry. You're part of that. Animals will be animals. And you either become one or you become food.
Agreed.
And I should note this, the Dog Lady is not to be confused with any type of creature that the Dog Man is. So the two are not the same. They're not one and the same. Although she has been described as having werewolf-like qualities, at heart she was once a human being.
That's a great story, hon. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. So, hon, do you want to sign us out?
I sure do. You better lock your doors. You better lock your windows. And you might want to check under your bed.
And if I see that Dog Lady under there, I'm going to bark. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. And we will see you again on Malice Monday.
We'll see you on Monday.